Hello all, Jamie Rodgers here from Craftmania, and today we are bringing you Recipes of Inspiration Part 4. Now, I know so many of you have been enjoying Part 1, 2 and 3 and really been sharing with us lots of ideas and creations that you've been making with them, which I promise you is a true joy to see, so please carry that on. I'll tell you towards the end of the video where you can share them with us so I get to see them, because I do love to see what you've been creating. Now, before we move into what Part 4 is for this series, I want to urge you, if you haven't already, please make sure you have subscribed to our channel and gone up and tapped the little notification bell to make sure you don't miss out on any of our videos. Now, you may or may not have seen throughout January already, we have been filling our YouTube channel full of videos. We have had, obviously, Recipes of Inspiration Part 1, 2, 3 and now 4. There has also been an incredible offer on Essential Card where you can buy 3 packets and get 1 free, which works out really good value. We have also had our 2J Stamp Company stamp offer, which you're going to see focused actually on in today's video as well, which is what I love being able to do, is bringing you sort of things from different series or different videos and bringing them together to show you why it all works together so well. And then, of course, just recently we've also launched our layering stencils video, which, if you haven't seen that, there's an incredible bundle and you can get some really lovely stencils at a fantastic price. But of course, this is all about our recipes of inspiration, and we don't want you to miss out on being creative and bringing together different mediums in ways that you might not have already thought about. And that's what today's video is all about. Now, if you're new to the channel, you might not know a couple of bits. First of all of the things we talk about in today's video will be available on the Craftmania website, which is www.craftmaniacraft.com. If you go onto the website, across the top there is a little menu bar. If you click the one that says YouTube, it will come down and it will give you all of the videos that we have recently done, and you can click on them, you can watch the videos on there, and you can see all of the pieces that we're talking about. So all of the products, if you want to see them, go and investigate them, or of course purchase them, you can do that on the dedicated page. It just saves you looking through 10,000 items that we stock at Craftmania and puts them all into one place to make it simple shopping and simple viewing for you. Now, if you live within the UK, your P&P is completely free anytime you spend over £5. If you live internationally and you would like to get any of the goodies that we're talking about, or any of the 10,000 items that we stock, then of course you can do that as well. And your P&P is capped at just £10. We try to keep our international shipping as low as we can. If we find your P&P is cheaper than £10, we will refund the difference for you. If it is dearer than £10, here at Craftmania, we actually pay that for you so that you can get as many good crafting items as you can anywhere in the world, and we try to help out with that where we can. If you've got any questions, pop onto the website and have a little look. If you don't like ordering online, or you've got questions, of course you can ask them in the comments, but if you'd like to talk to us directly, give us a call anytime, 01403 843 666. Now, I've done enough waffling and I've not told you what we are looking at today. Now, today is a video, I'm going to start off actually by showing you this one. This was part 2, and it's sort of a distant relation to part 2. When I mentioned part 2, I mean Recipes of Inspiration Part 2. So you can go back and watch that at the end of this one when I've stopped waffling. But this was part 2, and I'll show you more on the overhead when we get there, tell you more about the products used. But part 2 was all about glitz and glam and sparkle and very disco ball comes to life, which I really love. But actually in my heart, I'm quite elegant. You might not see it in any other part of me, but I love elegant styles, and I love that sort of Victorian glamour and that style of sort of elegance. So today's is all about paring that back and bringing in this gorgeous, look at that, isn't that rich? It looks like it belongs in a posh department store. It looks like it could be on set in Downton Abbey. It looks like we could frame this and turn it into a work of art. And I'm not on about the card, I'm on about the panel in the middle. We can do so much with this technique and take it to such large extents. We're looking at cards today, but this is just the tip of the iceberg. You could be doing this on large format sheets and going to town with it in your home decor. This could be for your construction. This could be so many different ways and ideas that you're going to bring to this. And I promise you, it's really simple. So let's jump on in and have a little look at how we're going to create this, shall we? So let's chat ingredients then for our card, because obviously we can see that we're going to create this opulent style. What do we actually need to achieve this? Well, a couple of important things. We need a stamp of your choice. I'm going to use our Periwinkle stamp, which just launched in the 2J's Stamp Company bundle, but can of course be bought individually. We're going to need a Stazon ink pad. Now I know when we launched our part 2 to our recipe series, we sold out of Stazon ink pads very, very quickly, but they are now back in stock, so get hold of one of these. You're going to need it for this technique. You're also going to need some self-adhesive sheets. Now I've already trimmed this one down, but there are lots of different types of self-adhesive sheets on our website, all different sizes, all different brands. So have a little look and see which pack suits you. Then we're going to need our pearl tints. Now you might look at these bottles and feel that these look an awful lot like our crystal tints that we were talking about in part 2. Now these really are sort of cousins, I like to call them. I like to put things into family ideas, so we're going to go with the idea that they're sort of a distant cousin. Now our pearl tints are a solid colour. Our crystal tints are a transparent. Crystal tints are great for doing the technique that we looked at when we was in part 2, because we can paint over something and we're still going to see it come through, which is what we wanted to achieve when we was painting over our glitter in stage 2. We still wanted the mirror card, we still wanted the glitter, we still wanted that glitz to shine through. We didn't want to cover it all up. If we was to use pearl tints, it would cover the top and you wouldn't see the glitter, you wouldn't see the texture, you wouldn't see anything come through. They're a very different sort of beast, if you like, but yet come in the same bottle, and of course have kept the Tints name. So there is sort of similarity, but there isn't. So hence the distant cousin idea. So we're going to want some pearl tints. On top of that, we are going to need some gilding flakes. Now, it's up to you what colour gilding flakes you use, and I will show you some examples towards the end of this video of where I've sort of tried different ideas. I'm going to be honest with you, I like the solid gold. I said this when we did part 2, how it was odd for me, because I did, when we were talking about this one, confess I always go for gold, but actually it was the silver that had won me over with this one. When I'm using glitter, for some reason I tend to radiate more to silver than gold, but because there's no glitter in this project, I feel that's why I'm more in love with the gold tone instead of the other shades of gilding flakes. Now there are millions of different colorways as well, and I will show you some examples using sort of mixed colors. This one, for instance, is our Summer Meadow. I'll show you a card with this one. But I actually found when I was using mixed colors, it detracted from the work that we're creating. You know, if you're going to put colour into your stamped image and then you're going to put colour into your gilding flakes, I found it sort of detracted from the detail of the actual flower or of the stamped image. It's up to you, and I will always urge you to experiment, because it's something I do or don't like doesn't mean it's something you will or won't like. So play around and see what you think. But I personally, if I'm shopping for these, I mean, this is new to me, I would probably go for the gold, or maybe the silver if you wanted a solid shade, but I'm all about the gold. You can let me know in the comments like you did last week. Do you prefer silver? Do you prefer gold? Do you prefer the mixed colours? Because it's a different technique, and just like me, I've swapped sides with colours, so it'll be interesting to see how you compare to whether you prefer the gold, the silvers, or the mixes. So we've got our ingredients down. We've got our pearl tints, we've got a Stazon, we've got a stamp. What else do we need? We need acetate. Now this is quite the important piece, because as you can see, we're going to be stamping onto our acetate like we have in this project, so that we've got that sort of reflection and we've got that acetate finish. So they are pretty much all of the crucial pieces I can think of that you are going to need, other than of course your apparatus to make it, your sort of stamp presses, your paint brushes, your bits like that. So let's jump in and actually start this, shall we? Because I'm waffling on and I haven't done nothing, so let's show you what we can do. So we're going to bring in the stamp press, and on the stamp press already is my lovely Periwinkle stamp. Now this one is part of the 2J stamp bundle that we mentioned. That was in a video earlier in the month. We do have these available for you as well. We're going to bring in our acetate, we're going to place that down, and we're going to ink it up with Stazon Ink. Now, I had a question after part 2 about how do I get a crisp stamped image with Stazon on acetates and mirror cards, and that's actually a really good question. And one of the sort of ideas I went back with, if you like, is to make sure that it isn't your first stamped impression. Because I find when I stamp with Stazon straight away onto acetate and the stamp is completely clean, it can sort of be a little bit more patchy. If I've stamped up my stamp a couple of times and stamped it off on copier paper or another project, then I find that the stamp is more likely to take the ink and transfer it over. I also find if I've used Stazon on my stamp and I haven't cleaned it off, which is quite common with me, and I come back and add more Stazon to it, that barrier's in place and I find I get a better stamped image again. I'm not encouraging you not to clean your stamps, but I am saying that sometimes that coating can help. I always follow Tim Holtz. I read once in an interview that he doesn't clean his stamps, so that's my excuse in life. So it prevents me from having to. If you do want to clean your stamps, then of course we have an amazing stamp cleaner, and every now and again I'll have a little fit and a fad and go off and clean all of mine, but it's quite rare, to be fair. So we're going to come in and we're going to stamp this down. Now, another one of my tips was, which I'm not doing because it's really boring in a video, is to tape down your acetate. Whenever we stamp on acetate, we will find that we're going to get that sort of pull as it comes away. It tends to move your acetate, even with magnets. Even when I've put 6 or 7 magnets down, I still find that I get that pull, my acetate will move. If you use some tape, stencil tape, masking tape, and anchor this down as well as your magnets. And another tip is to bring in something like a rule if you've got a metal one and put that down when you're lifting up. It will all help prevent moving your acetate. So if you do need to, you can come back in and stamp it multiple times. I don't need to do that. I'm more than happy with my image. And to be honest with you, I'm going to cheat because I've got one that's already cut down and nicely crisply stamped and dry. So I'm going to bring this one in from here. So we have our stamped image onto our piece of acetate. Now, this did take a bit of experimenting, and I love doing this, genuinely. I love having the chance to sit around and play and seeing what I can come up with. And I did a few versions of this technique, and I found that I didn't like them. So I had to learn quickly how I wanted to make it and how it was going to work better for what I wanted. So this might seem like an odd stage, but this is how I found it works best. So I'm going to bring in an offcut, and this genuinely is an offcut. It was one that was in my drawer of a self-adhesive sheet. And again, I think this is a great technique for this because it means that we can use up our offcuts, because it doesn't matter what size stamp we're using to do this technique. It could be smaller, it could be larger. We could be doing background panels. The options are endless. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to place it down on top of the sheet. And it doesn't matter, and you will feel this is the side, so I've stamped on the top here. And it doesn't matter if we're working on the top or on the reverse, either will work perfectly fine. And that could actually come in handy because on your project, you might wish to do one on one side and one on the other and flip it over for a gatefold card. And unless somebody really comes up and feels the ink, they're not going to know that you've flipped it. And that's one of the joys of acetate, is obviously it's that transparency that means we can flip it and it won't look bad. So we're going to bring this panel in and we're going to place it down on top of the self-adhesive sheet. Now my question at home would be, why have I put this on first? We know we're going to paint it. Why would we not paint it first and then put the self-adhesive on and work on top of that? The reason is if we paint it first and then we put the self-adhesion on, the paint is going to have a texture. It's going to have that lift to it, especially the paints we're using or the product that we're using. It is quite a thick medium, and we want it to be thick because we want it to cover up anything that's going to go underneath it. We want it to be a solid shade. So because of that, if we then put the self-adhesive sheet over the back of it, we would end up with lumps and bumps coming around our flowers and it wouldn't be smooth. And I have tried this and I personally found adding the sheet on first was a much better idea. So we're going to take away the excess, and you're going to notice that my piece of acetate is slightly bigger than the self-adhesive sheet. That again, of course, is fine because we're not going to use it as the size you see it. We're going to be trimming it down to make this card. So we do want it to be slightly smaller, even where I've covered, it's going to be smaller than that. But again, that's a bit of a tip. It never hurts to use just fractionally more, because if we use more, we can then trim it to where we want it to be. So you can see I've sort of gone over by about ½ an inch to what we're actually going to end up needing. So now we've got this on, give that a good firm push down, make sure that there's no air bubbles. If you have created any air bubbles on it, which I haven't this time, but if you have, just take a pokey tool and pop the air bubbles, give it a good rub. You won't see them, it's not a problem, but you will see the bubble if you leave the bubble. So do remove the bubble. We're then going to take off the top layer of this. So we are working on the sticky side. Now this is where you do need to be careful because we are working on a sticky area. And if you want to, you can start masking off the bits so that you're not going to cover them or damage them while you're working on them. Because the last thing we want is anything touching any of the self-adhesive area at this stage. I'm going to go rogue and we're going to go off on a tangent and we're going to hope for the best, which should be fine. So we're going to bring in our pearl tints. Now on my finished sample that I'm sharing with you on the actual card, I have used this one, which is Heavenly Pink, and I have used this one, which is Racing Green. But on the card we're going to complete today, I've actually gone ahead and I've used this Raining Purple. There are 20 different colours available in our pearl tints collections, so you've got an awful lot of combinations that you might want to play around with. But we're going to go for these two. So we're going to start off with the Raining Purple. Now you can, if you want to, especially with this piece that we've taken off the top, we can use this as a bit of a paint palette, and I will be doing that and I will recommend it because it's quite a great way to have something that's disposable, so it saves you cleaning. If you're going to doing loads of these, then of course put it out into a proper palette and we can keep dipping into them. But actually I'm going to go straight onto the project and I'm going to fill in quite an area, and I'm not going to go to the edges because I don't want this to flatten down and go over the edge of the flower, but I do want us to go right the way up to the edge. Now, because we're working on something that is self-adhesive, it is preventing it from just flooding and going. And I don't know how quite all I do, but you know, it's holding on to it. It's not going to just travel down like it might do if we were working just on acetate. It's not quite as smooth, and of course it's sticky. So we're going to colour in just a couple of flowers. I'm going to take this and I'm going to put it down into those areas, and we're going to, I get carried away. I always think when I'm going to do a video, I'm just going to do one, and then I end up doing all of them because I get carried away. So we'll put the product down onto these, and you can see just big blobs in the middles of the flower heads. And then we're going to bring in our paintbrush. And all we're going to do with our paintbrush is just take this around the edges, trying to make sure that we don't go over the edge, but that we go right up and even cover that black line, because we want to get in as much detail as we can. And when we get onto the next stage, if we haven't gone right to the edge, it will be seen. Now, for some stamps, you might find it easier not to put the product out onto the actual image, and you might find it easier to pick it up directly off of the palette or off of your self-adhesive sheet topper and bring this in and put it down. That's up to you. You know, work with how you find easier. You might find that by painting it on as well, that you get it quite thin and it will still be relatively transparent. If it is, there's nothing wrong with doing a couple of coats. You can always come back in and build up. It's harder to take it away than it is to add to it, and that goes for most products. So it's always a good tip to start off light and add more. And this is fine. You know, there's no rush for this. We can create this panel, we can come back and paint it again 2 or 3 times if we need to and really perfect it. But for the video, obviously, time is of the essence. So we're going to take our paintbrush and we're going to take this out to the sides. Now, as you can see, I do get a bit carried away. And if you wanted, you could blend these colours thinking about it. You know, if you've got 20 different shades and you wanted to bring them in and play around with those, you could. But for me, one shade is fine for our flowers. And you're also going to notice I'm leaving the middles. I'm not covering the centres. Now, that's a couple of options again for you. You could bring in another colour of our pearl tints and we could add them over the top. Or what I quite like is to leave it open and let our gilding flakes come in and infill that bit, because I find it matches in slightly more. Now we've got these little flowers popping out here of our little buds, so I'm going to take the colour off of the sheet and I'm going to take those and fill these bits in. Now I wasn't aiming to do all of this, but as we're here, I might as well finish the flowers so that they're done. And then we will bring in our lovely green. Excuse me. Then we will bring in our Racing Green. So we're going to squidge out a little bit of this. And this time, because of how delicate the leaves are, I'm not going to take the product directly to the image because it's just going to end up too blobby and I'm not going to be able to take it to where I need it to be. So we're going to bring this in on the brush, and I won't do all of these. I said that about the flowers, didn't I? But I'm not going to do all of these. We're just going to do this one branch for speed. And we're going to colour these down. And once you've done all of your green bits and you've done all of the colours as you want it to be, this is the hard bit. This to me is the hard bit because I'm the most impatient person of going. So you've got to leave that to one side and let it dry. I know it's not exactly technical, it's not particularly physical, but to me, that's the hardest bit. And we also need to put it in a place where nothing's going to come along and touch the sticky bit, because we need it to be clean, ready for the next layer. So take this, and I've got a little bookcase off to one side in my room, and I pop it on the bookcase and I leave them to dry. And in honesty with you, you'll see I've done quite a few of these. I've been batch doing this stage and then coming back later to do the next stage. So off to one side, leave to dry. Dry time will vary depending on how deep you've applied the product, but I would imagine if you say about an hour, that's probably a good idea. Now you can heat it because of obviously it's not going to affect the product, but you might find it will affect your self-adhesive sheet because some self-adhesive sheets crinkle up if we heat them, and it might affect your acetate if we're not working on a heat-resistant acetate. So again, you can heat, but I would go very carefully. What I would recommend you do, and this again is another tip for you, anytime you're doing something, and if you're like me and you're impatient and you want it to be dry and you don't know when it's dry, so you come along and you stick your finger in it and then you go, oh, it's not dry, which I probably do about 100 times a day. It is a good idea to do another little sample piece. Just cut off a piece of acetate, just a square bit, and pop out some of the product roughly as deep as what you have done it on your image, and put that beside your image so they're in the same conditions. And then when you want to be tempted to go, oh, is it dry? You can do that on the little square and it's not going to affect your work. That might be common sense and you're probably all already doing it, but it is something it took me a while to come up with, but it is quite handy, especially with texture pastes and bits like that as well, because some look dry and you think they're dry and then you can't touch them and they're not dry. So I speak from experience here, or stupidity, but it's good to check. Now on the reverse of mine, because mine was dry and I wanted to get this kit ready, I've left on the back here the topper part. And you can do that. If yours are dry and you don't want them coming in contact with anything else, but you want to do this part at a later date, then pop on that onto the reverse again and we'll come back to it. These sheets, these topper sheets off of your self-adhesive sheets, these are so invaluable for doing bits like this, for keeping pieces ready for when you want to come to them, for using them as paint palettes because they're not going to absorb. And another one of my tips, and we'll get to this maybe a little later, but I'm using a lot of this foam tape at the moment. This is dot and dab foam tape. It's 5 meters and it's really inexpensive. I think it's like something like £1 something. It's not dear at all for a foam tape, but it's 18 mil thick. So 18 mil. Most foam tapes are 12 mil thick. This is 18 mil thick and it's 2 millimeters in depth. Getting this all the way around the wrong way really. It's 18 millimeters deep, I suppose I should say, 2 millimeters thick, but you know what I mean. It's 18 millimeters wide, which is perfect for us to cut it down, but trying to cut down foam tape can be really tricky. If you take this and you put it out on lines onto the top of your self-adhesive sheet, you can then use it in your guillotine to cut this down into 2, 3, 4 strips, depending on how frugal you want to be. You get 5 meters per roll, which again is quite a lot per roll in comparison to most brands. So if you've got 5 meters and you're cutting that into 4 or 3 or 2, obviously you can get 10 meters out of it, 15 meters out of it, 20 meters out of it, all at a very inexpensive price. Now you might wonder, do they do this in white? They do it in white, but it's been out of stock for a very, very long time. And on their website just says coming soon. But we do have quite a bit of the black in stock if it's not one you've used. And that really is a great value way to get more out of your foam tape just by using these. But it doesn't have to be that foam tape, it can be any. So back to our panel, let's find a piece of paper because we're going to need to pick up our flakes. And we're going to bring this in and we're going to bring in our gilding flakes. So I'm going to use Golden Jewels, but again, loads of different colours, over 20 colours to choose from on the Craftmania website. But as I mentioned earlier, the gold is where my heart's at for this project. I'm then going to bring in one of our little self-adhesive sponges, and these are magical because they won't stick down to the sheet, but they will burnish down our flakes, which saves me getting too at home with the flakes. This will do all of the sort of delicate bit for me, and I can just brush these straight across the top here. Now, this varies and people have different ideas. I really like it if you get a mix of big flake areas and then around the edges, if we can take these little bits and really burnish them down, I feel that you get more of like a vignette edge to them and you get a bit more texture coming in. And I find around the edges that can really frame what we're working on. So I'm purposely going to use up these smaller pieces, but if you prefer, you can bring in more larger flakes so you've got them bigger bits like you see there. So we'll take this across and we're just going to burnish this down. Now at this stage you can see exactly where we've been painting and all of the pieces that we've put down on our project. And this is now ready, oh, if we can get it off our sheet, there we go. This is now ready and dry and perfectly set to go onto your project. Now how fun is that? How easy is that? Stamp it, paint it, let it dry, stick on your flakes. Of course, don't forget your self-adhesive sheet. That's the bit we need in the middle. And then from here, one of the nice bits I found was depending on what colour you put underneath it, you will also find slightly different shading come through. So if we go for a white, for instance, and I don't know how well, I'll bring this up to you because you might be able to see it. In the areas where our flakes are more sort of cracked and smaller, you'll see some of that white come through. And it can just give you a different undertone. It can just give you a slightly different feel. If we bring black card in underneath this, if we can get it in here, see there you go, you might be able to see that better. The black will shine up all through these cracked areas and give it more of a vintage undertone, which is something I personally, because I'm all about this Downton Abbey vintageness, I really like that bit more than the white. But again, depending on the flakes you're playing with, you might find that mirror card works really nicely under there. If you want that to be completely gold and you don't want an undertone, bring in a piece of mirror card and put under there, because that again will give you a completely different effect and it will make it look just full on gold and you'll just get depths of gold going through on that. So play around, see what you think. But this is the beauty at the moment because it is now all covered. So we can play around with our tones, we can play around with our depths. You might want to add some foam tape to it and put it into a frame like some of my cards. And then you've got that shadow depth under there as well. But play around and see how you get on. Now then, I'm going to take my panel and I'm going to put it onto a piece of black card. And I've already cut my piece of black card. Let's have a little look. What have we got here? This piece is 3 inches by 5.5. So then we're then going to take our panel and we're going to pop this on the top of it so that we've got that black shining through. So I've cut my panel so it's exactly the same height. So we're again at the 5.5 inches, but I've just left this slight black line just coming out from the edges there so that we've got that tone. Now another good thing about using these products is we can adhere this down onto our black card either with another piece of our self-adhesive sheet, but because of that can be slightly more expensive than it needs to be, I'm just going to use our Dries Clear Glue because it's going to do exactly what it says. Now, although you're going to possibly see it through the top of your layers at this stage, once it's set down, it will dry clear. You're not going to know it's there and it will be a nice bond between the acetate and the card. So there we go. There is our actual panel complete. Our gold in our flowers, our black card shining through in a couple of little areas. And I think that is really, really special. We're then going to bring in a matching size card in height. So we're again back to our 5.5 inches. And for our width on this one, we have gone for 5.75 inches. And we're going to bring in our glue again because we just want to stick this down flat. You could, of course, raise this panel on some foam tape if you prefer, but we're going to go down flat and we're going to place that on just on the side there. Then we're going to bring in one of our butterflies. Now I keep using this butterfly. This is one of my butterfly dies and it's probably my favourite out of the set, but there's some much larger ones and there's some smaller ones in there, but I really like this one. So I've cut this from black card because I want to complement the black stamping that we did with the Stazon. And I'm going to bring this in and we're going to place this possibly just down here, just on the side there. Then we're going to bring in some of our gems. Now, I don't know if you've seen these or not, but we do these in a couple of different colourways, and we do them in mixed colours, and we do them in pearls. These are £1 a sheet. Now, I don't know if you've found these, but they're an absolute bargain. Now, I've cut my header off, and I keep them in here like a little pocket, so I can just bring them up. And we're going to bring a few of these, and we're going to place them down onto the middle of our butterfly to make that little line. Now, quite often, you will find that when I put the sort of body into a butterfly, I'll use pearls, and the pearl lines are all joined. We do them on our website so we don't have to lift them in individually and straighten them up. But actually for this one I really wanted that sort of gold opulence to match in with the gold in the background. So instead I wanted these to coordinate, and I wanted to also be able to spread these out at the top here, bringing them down in a little set of 3. And I also wanted to bring them off to the side over here. So again, spacing was important and I didn't want them to have to look a bit odd all in one bunched up line. So we're going to put 3 down here, 3 over there. Now, another thing that I found whilst doing these that I've really fallen in love with is actually adding a couple of pearls just dotted around, or gems I should say, dotted around into this image. And I haven't done this on the original, but I feel it gives it even more elegance and even more opulence just by adding in just a few random ones. And again, you can place these where you want to, but just adding them on top of that lovely shimmer just brings more 3D depth into the project that we're creating. Now, don't forget, in this colourway, or on this card, we've used different colours. We went for that lovely raining purple, which I think pops really lovely against that gold. On the original version that we've sort of been copying this time, this one was done with the heavenly pink. So it really is going to be down to how you interpret your colours and how you play around to the effects you're going to achieve. There is a beautiful teal to give you an idea. There is some lovely peaches. There really is 20 different shades that you can go to town with and choose from, but that will give you an idea of how to create them. From there, it's down to how you want to build them up and what you wish to do with them. So exactly the same as what we just did here is my larger card. Now, this is an 8x8 card. You can see that I've done exactly the same technique in the middle on the acetate, and then I've framed it. I've put some mirror card underneath it so we get gold coming through under the cracks instead of black, and I've added on every time a star twinkles, I think of you and smile on one of my little banners. And you can see here is where I thought about actually adding in the extra little crystals to go over the tops of them as well. We also mentioned about bringing in different colour gilding flakes, didn't we? And I do really urge you to play around with that. But this is one that I did, and I really loved my holly. I thought the holly looked beautiful. And then I put the gilding flakes on, and I used this one, which is called Summer Meadow. And I actually found that by doing so, I just lost my holly in the picture. And I feel had I have gone for gold or silver, that holly would have really popped and sort of come out. I'm not moaning about the card. It's not that I don't like it. I think it's very nice. But when we compare it to how the flowers pop with just the gold, I feel we lost something in this one. Now, being honest with you, this tone, this Summer Meadow, has got quite a bit of teal in it, which I think once actually on the project looked rather green, which detracted from the holly. So maybe if the flower had been used and it had been in that lovely purple shade, or the bright pinks maybe, or something similar, then you would have noticed that stand out more. The red for the berries, for instance, really pops against the flakes. So I think it was just me going off on the wrong colours, but it is a bit of a warning to have a think about where you're going with it, possibly more than I did, because I should have really realised that, and it might have saved me from doing something, as I say, I like, but I would have liked to have loved. Again, on this one, frames to sort of build it up. Holly Jolly used as the stamp on here. That's one of my little stamps. And then one of my little banners. And again, just some mirror card and some matching burgundy card to tone in with the berries in the middle. Then we go on to the silver. Now the silver one, this card, when I did this one, I actually painted on all of my flowers, and I did them too light and you could see through them too much, and I really wanted them to pop against that silver. So I did do a couple of layers, and I think that's quite important that we remember that we can add more than one layer. So if you hold it up and you can still see through it, and we want it to be more of a solid colour, then don't hesitate to recolour them. But this time we've got the Silver Moon gilding flakes on here. Now I really like that actually. I think that the silver does pop. As I said earlier, I'm more about the opulence of the gold, but actually silver, very modern, very fresh. Possibly we could use this, in my mind, for more teenagers cards, bits like that, and keep it a bit younger and a bit fresher, depending on the stamps that we're going to use with them. But play and see how you feel. Then another version to share with you, this one again, and I did paint this on, so it is more transparent, and that's quite nice too, because it does give you an idea. The transparency of this one, again, is still achieved with the pearl tints, but you could try, and I haven't, so this is, again, what the recipes are all about. It's all about playing and trying and seeing what you think, but you could try with your crystal tints to create something more along these lines, which is why I wanted to share it with you. This time I've painted them, exactly the same as what I've shared with you, painted them, but very lightly. I've then let it dry, and of course, because of the paint has masked off the areas, just like it would if it was thick or thin, it's still masked off the sticky. I've then put on the gold gilding flakes, so you've got that same idea, but because of the flowers were quite transparent, I've put a piece of gold mirror card behind it so that we've still got that shade of gold shining through from under there. I found if I put black card under there or anything else, it darkened down the transparency of the flowers too much and it didn't look too nice. But if you're going to go transparent, mirror card can be your friend because it will light it from behind and bring it forward. So whether you play with the crystal tints on this idea or apply the pearl tints very thinly, either or do pop under your mirror card, and that will give you that pop. Little butterfly in the corner here, another one of Jane Gill's beautiful stamps used for this one and this one. And then of course, oh, that was hers as well, this lovely holly. And then all of the others that we've looked at were done with the lovely periwinkle stamp from 2Js. Now, as I mentioned, I will put all of the items that you need to create these cards. And by that, I mean the stamps, the butterflies, the different nesting dies, all of the gilding flakes I've used. I'll put a link to the gilding flakes so you can go and see them. And I'll give you all of the pearl tints all on one page so that you don't have to go hunting for them. And of course, that is on www.craftmaniacrafts.com. Head to the little YouTube panel at the top there, and it will drop down and you can find the page for today's show, and you can find all of the items that you'd like on there. Now, I haven't mentioned this yet actually, but all of our Cosmic Shimmer items have got 20% off throughout January. So if you are looking at the pearl tints or the gilding flakes and thinking that you need to get your hands on these, then this is the time to go and get them because they are 20% off until the end of January. Thank you very much for watching today's video. If you've got any questions, don't hesitate to pop them in the comments, or as always, pop onto our group, which is Create with Craftmania Jamie Rodgers. There you can share with us what you've been creating, you can share with us any recipes that you're working with, you can ask us questions, and you can talk to us about any crafty related problems you may have. Thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you all again soon. Bye for now.